The second family within our second generation, we're in the stainless steel generation, which is the second generation after the fabricated steel. Anyway, the 2001 SS denotes a change that took place after the original 2000 SS series came on. This was produced in sizes 2.5 through 8 inch. Production began late 90s, around 1999, was discontinued around 2003. There was a model 2001 which was produced in the smaller sizes, meaning 1/2 through 2 inch. And this was a backflow assembly that was produced by Watts as their model 775. As I said, Watts was purchased Ames in 1997, and they commingled some of their models, although they had different model numbers, but it was the same basic design. The 2001, again, 1/2 through 2 inch, is the same as the Watts 775, and we'll cover that in the Watts section of the backflow assemblies. The 3001 SS was the double check detector assembly in this second family of our second generation of Ames assemblies. The 4001 SS was the reduced pressure assemblies, again in sizes 3 through 6 inch. They made a model 4001 in the small sizes, 1/2 through 1.5 inch, which was known as the Watts model 995, which we'll cover when we get to the Watts side of the catalog. And the reduced pressure detector assembly is the model 5001 SS, produced in sizes 3 through 6 inch. The small 1/2 through 2 inch size model 2001, which is the same as the Watts 775. This is what it looks like. We'll cover this in the Watts section. The model 4001, which was produced in sizes 1/2 through 1.5 inch. Again, same as the Watts model 995. We'll cover that in the Watts section. So the 2001, 3001, 4001, 5001 SS, double check detector RP and RP detector assemblies. Fabricated stainless steel bodies similar to the 00 SS versions. A little bit different on the internal construction of the valve. The check assemblies, inlet check here, second check there, but the relief valve went through the center. If you remember in the old SS version, the relief valve was mounted underneath. The relief valve mounts internal inside the assembly. They use the same groove coupling to enter into the check assembly's external relief valve sensing line that you see here. The internal parts are a little bit different than the 00 SS version, and the check assemblies are repairable in the field. In other words, the check rubber disc can be replaced. If you remember with the 00 SS designs, that the check modules were not field repairable and you had to replace the entire check module. This one you can change the check disc, and we'll show you how that works. And there's the relief valve stem assembly, which goes through the center, and the diaphragm is actually connected onto the relief valve cover, which has to be taken off for the average repair. So let's take apart a 4001 SS and see what all these little parts look like. First thing we're going to do, after shutting it off, open all the test cocks, bleed all the air, remove the relief valve sensing line. Relief valve sensing line has a hydraulic fitting that unscrews from the top, allows me to disassemble. We have a groove coupling that holds the cover on the top, on the inlet, on the check. Now, the thing that's unique about this is that the cover holds the checks inside the body, but this is also where our relief valve diaphragm sits. So first thing we're going to do before we take this apart is inspect the version we have of the relief valve stem. And when I say inspect the version, what I'm looking at is the plug inside the top of this relief valve stem. You'll notice this is a black plastic nut that's in here. This is the older version. The newest version would look like this and would have a stainless steel nut in the top. So if you have on the right where you see the old plastic version and the new stainless steel version on the left, this is important to know. Because if you've got the old version on the right, those parts are no longer available, and it has to be upgraded to the new style, which is the stainless steel nut that you see on your left. So we'll check those both apart and look at the stems once we get it out of the body. That's an important point at this point, old and new style relief valve stem. Once I know that, go ahead and remove my groove coupling, which holds my relief valve stem / cover to the top. Clamp, groove coupling comes off, 2 pieces. Now the stem will come out. The gasket that we talked about earlier with the earlier version is also my diaphragm. So it's connected right to it, 1 piece. So the cover gasket is my diaphragm also on that stem. So stem assembly comes out in 1 piece like this. We'll put it on the side for a minute and concentrate on the checks. Now, to remove the check assemblies out of the body, we want to use our cover bolts. Just like with the 2001, 3001, 4000, 5000 SS versions, not the 1 but the 0, we have to unscrew the check assemblies out of the body. You'll notice they look similar. Same things we talked about with the OSS series was that the cam arms have to be horizontal, which in this one they grooved it so it will end up. Same story, it'll end up at this position and quarter turn will take it down to here. Unlike the 4000 SS, the earlier generation, where that cam arm could be anywhere, this one was built so that the groove would make sure it landed here, hand tight, and then quarter turn would take it down to here. Now, main thing that's unique on the check assemblies is that the groove that holds the checks in the body is actually grooved into the body. If you remember on the 4000 SS, there was a welded piece inside the body that the check attached to. On this later generation, they actually put the groove inside the body. This led to a couple complications because one of the problems when the assembly was installed, it would be bolted in between two gate valves like this. And let's say it was off by a quarter inch, 1/8 inch, 3/8, some number like that. How does a technician, when he's off that close? Sometimes they'll put another gasket in there. Sometimes all they do is crank those bolts up and just tighten up the nuts and bolts tighter, which pulls that body apart. This is a fabricated tubing body. You can see it's relatively thin stainless steel tubing. And if we take that torque and actually, with the torque of those bolts and flanges on this, pull that check assembly apart, there is a chance that we can spread these threads. Those threads spread, that will hold that check inside the body, and it may not unscrew. If you ever come to take one of these apart and the check assemblies will not come out, good rule of thumb is always loosen the bolts on the number 2 or downside flange. On this version and on the 4000 SS version, the 0 SS and the 01 SS version. Both have that same problem because if the tubing body gets torqued in any way when it's installed, it'll make it so the check assemblies do not come out easily. Okay, so we've removed our relief valve stem. We have to remove our check assemblies now. Removing our check assemblies, we're going to go ahead and use our cover bolts. Using our cover bolts is going to allow us to stick them inside the check. That allows us to get our drift pin in here, go ahead and insert it and unscrew the check. Once, like the OSS checks, once we have it loosened, it'll come out relatively easily because it's an O-ring seal. Just like with the 00 SS versions though, we have to turn the checks 90 degrees to get out of the check body like this. Second check, same story. We're going to use our cover bolts from the groove coupling, installing them inside the check assembly like this. We're going to use our drift pin, allowing us to unscrew the check assembly. So go ahead and loosen it up. Once it's loose, take our bolts out. Check assembly will come out. Just like before, we want to make sure we mark it so we know where our cam arm is in horizontal like this. We don't want the cam arm vertical like this. We want the cam arm horizontal. Again, the way the body is grooved, it should end up like this, and the quarter turn should take it right there, but it's always good to mark it just to be safe. Once we get the check assembly loose, quarter turn out of the body. If you need to just clean the check, the second check cam arm can be brought up, opened like this for inspection, so we can take a look if we're just going to be cleaning or wiping off the check assembly like that. But if we're going to be repairing it, we've got to go a little farther. Now, with the 4000 SS, the original generation, the check components were not field repairable, and we had to replace the entire check component. This version, the checks are rebuildable in the field. That means we can replace the rubber disc. Just see right there and see the screws that hold the disc into the disc holder. So I want to go through the procedure for taking the check assemblies apart so we can replace the disc on the check assembly. We'll do the second check first. The load's a little lighter, a little easier to do. First thing you'll notice that there is a hole in this cam arm right here. There's a secondary set of holes on the back side of this stationary arm on the back of the check assembly. What's going to happen is we're going to get these two bolt holes to line up, and we're going to stick a small screwdriver to hold them in place. So what we're going to do is this. Get check assembly in place. And this way we've got a screwdriver holding the long cam arm and the stationary cam arm in place. This now takes all of the load off of our disc holder. Small little E-ring here, right here, one on both sides. We take one of the E-rings off, drive this pin through, the disc holder will come down in one piece, and then all we do is remove the 4 bolts and replace our rubber disc on that. Leaving this pin in here holds that torsion spring like this so that the disc holder is loose and able to be repaired. This is for the second check only on this one, which would be the same on the double check. Both checks would be similar to this. Now, the first check of the RP obviously has a heavier spring load. It has a little bit different. Not going to be able to pull this up, and it doesn't have that same type of configuration. Remember when we were talking about the 4000 SS, that there was this this bolt on the outlet flange of the number 2 flange. Same thing happens on the 4001 SS, and it's a very important part for this for repair. We're going to use that bolt on the number 2 check. We're going to pull the check assembly open, and once we have it open, you're going to notice that there's a small indent on the inside of the cam arm. In other words, this is not visible at this point. All you see is the hole right here. But if you look down inside, right down here, when I pull it back, you're going to see a little recess. So we're going to open it up to that point where the recess sits right on the cam arm. Here's the little notch in the edge of the cam. Here's where it sits in the roller. So we don't utilize the pin this time like we do on the second check. Once we've got it to this point, now you can see that the disc holder is loose. Take our little E-ring off, drive this pin out, disc holder will come out, and we'll go ahead and change our 4 bolts and change our flat rubber disc inside the 4001 SS checks. So main difference in this is that the checks are field replaceable, meaning I can replace the check disc. Once we've replaced the disc, we're going to use that body piece again. Disc holder is going to flap down. This is going to allow us to pull our check assembly off on the first check. Let's go ahead and talk about our relief valves for a second. As I mentioned, the old version is going to look like this. Old version has a plastic black nut on the top. The newer version has the stainless steel on the top. If you have the old version like this one on your left, it is no longer rebuildable and has to be upgraded to the new style, which is the one you see on your right. So if you have the old one, we're going to throw this away and insert the new stem. Now the stems are not interchangeable completely in the sense that it does the exact same thing. The main difference is on the old style, the relief valve disc was mounted on the bottom of the stem, which you see right here. On the bottom of the new style is the relief valve seat. In other words, with the new style, the disc becomes stationary at the bottom of the body. With the old style, the seat was stationary at the bottom of the body. So old style, seat, new style, disc sits at the bottom. So we have to unscrew the old style seat and put it where the disc goes in here, and then the seat moves up and down on the newer style. Let's go ahead and assume we've got the new style stem. And again, the disc which sits in the bottom of the stem does not unscrews out of there to change. To rebuild the new style stem, what we're going to do is there's a bolt on the top of our relief valve, and I've got it loosened already, so it'll come apart. There will be a slight spring tension underneath. There are O-ring seals underneath, so it'll be relatively easy to pull, but there'll be that slight spring tension. We have the piston, our relief valve spring. Out comes our stem. Our diaphragm, which is attached to our gasket. Stem comes out at this point. On top here, plunger off there, and there's our diaphragm. So if we're going to rebuild this and we have the new style, we're going to replace the rubber parts, which include the O-ring, diaphragm, and our new disc, which goes into the body. Reassembling is going to be just the reverse. And another stem O-ring right here. Goes through the center, comes out here, going to catch our washer and our nut. And that's what the new relief valve stem rebuilt, changing our gasket here. Now we're ready to reassemble. And yes, I'm going to put the old stem back in because I didn't change the disc on the bottom. So we're going to put our check assemblies in first. And just like taking them out, first check had to come out first, second check had to come out second. So just the reverse, second check has to go in first. Rotate in. O-ring seal right here. So we've got to get it started. Once we have it started, hand tight. Again, notice the cam arm right here is in that position. We're going to take it hand tight so it stops here. Using our 2 bolts again through here. We're going to get our quarter turn rotation so that the cam is in that horizontal configuration just like this. First check, same thing. Is to go in, rotate 90 degrees, tighten into the body. Same thing, it's going to go hand tight to this point with the O-ring. Bolts in place, get it to our quarter turn rotation where it's horizontal. Now we can go ahead and put our relief valve stem back in. Again, this is the old version, not the new version, but I'm just doing it for demonstration purposes. Making sure that the groove coupling is underneath that groove is critical. It has to be under that groove and on top of the cover. The key points that groove holds at is here and right down there inside that indent. Second clamp goes on here. That. Bolts. Nuts. As we talked about with the 4000 SS, critical that these 2 points bottom out right here. Right there is where these have to touch, exactly like that, tightened all the way up on both sides. And once you're done, your dust cap goes back on top. And reattach our relief valve sensing line, which attaches here, goes to our fitting on top. That's our 4001 SS.